Ryan, at some point you have to admit this career experiment failed. My mother said it while cutting into a slice of lemon pie, as casually as if she were commenting on the weather. The table went quiet. My father, Thomas, lowered his coffee cup. My younger brother, Kevin, suddenly became very interested in the napkin beside his plate. I looked across the dining room at my mother, Linda Mitchell, and waited for her to realize how the sentence had sounded. She did not. "Mom," Kevin said quietly. "What?" she asked. "I am being realistic." 20 minutes earlier, we had been celebrating Kevin's promotion at the bank where he had worked for 6 years. He had just become a regional lending manager, and I was genuinely happy for him. Dad had opened a bottle of sparkling cider because Kevin was driving home. Mom had made pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans, and the lemon pie Kevin had requested every birthday since college. It should have been his evening. Then Mom asked whether his new position came with a salary increase. Kevin answered. Dad congratulated him again. And somehow, as it often did, the conversation turned toward me. "Kevin has been patient," Mom said. "He stayed with a good company, worked his way up, and now look at the results." There was that word. Results. I had spent almost 4 years hearing my mother use it as if life were a report card she could hold under a kitchen light. A title was a result. A salary was a result. A house in a good neighborhood was a result. A retirement account was definitely a result. Building a company from a co-working desk while paying yourself less than your younger brother made at a bank was apparently something else. "I am proud of him," I said. "So am I," Mom replied. "That is not what I mean." I knew exactly what she meant. Dad knew too. "Linda," he said, "we do not need to do this tonight. I am not doing anything. I worry about him." She turned back to me. "Ryan, you are 36 years old. How long are you going to keep pretending this is temporary sacrifice instead of admitting that maybe you made the wrong choice?" Kevin shifted in his chair. "His company is still operating." Mom sighed. "I know it is operating. I am talking about his career." I almost smiled at the distinction. For years earlier, I had been the son she mentioned first when relatives asked about her children. I had a corporate job in Charlotte, a strong salary, health insurance, a retirement plan, and a path toward senior management. Then I resigned and started a logistics technology company with Marcus Reed. Mom had never understood why. She understood even less after I sold my BMW, moved into a smaller apartment, and spent 2 years working from a shared office where the conference rooms had to be reserved through an app. From where she stood, my life had moved backward. She did not know that our company had become profitable. She did not know how many clients we had. She did not know what we had spent the last 11 months testing with one of the largest distribution networks we had ever approached. That was partly her fault. It was partly mine. Somewhere along the way, I had stopped explaining. "You could still go back," she said. "You have experience." Jennifer said companies are hiring people with your background. Jennifer Collins? Yes. I nearly laughed. Jennifer was not just some executive Mom happened to know. She had been advising Marcus and me for almost a year. Mom had met her once at a charity event and apparently had no idea how closely Jennifer was connected to my business. "I am not looking for a job," I said. "That is what worries me." "Why?" "Because you seem comfortable with this." She gestured vaguely toward me, as though my entire professional life were sitting between the salt shaker and the pie plate. "With what?" "Waiting." I looked at her. "You think that is what I have been doing?" "I think you keep telling yourself something big is around the corner." Dad leaned back. "Linda." "No, Thomas. He is my son. I am allowed to worry when I see him spending his best working years chasing something that has not produced anything." That one landed. Kevin looked at me, waiting for a reaction. For years earlier, I would have argued. 2 years earlier, I might have listed client numbers, revenue growth, retention rates, and every small victory I could find. That night, I did neither. My phone vibrated once in my pocket. I ignored it. Mom continued. "I am not saying you are not talented. You are. That is why this is so frustrating. You had a career people would be grateful to have. And I left it." "Exactly. Because I wanted to build something." "And how long does building take before you are allowed to call it what it is?" I placed my fork beside my plate. "What do you think it is?" Mom hesitated, but only for a second. "A failure." Dad closed his eyes. Kevin whispered, "Mom." I looked at her. She was not smiling. There was no satisfaction in her face. She believed she was helping me by saying the things she thought everyone else was too polite to say. That almost made it worse. "You have not seen the results yet." I said. Mom frowned. What results? My phone vibrated again. This time I took it out. An email notification filled the screen. The sender was Jennifer Collins. I could see only the subject line. Final approval. For almost 11 months, Marcus and I had been waiting for those 2 words. My pulse changed, but I kept my expression still. Mom noticed the phone. Is something wrong? No. Then what results are you talking about? I locked the screen and slipped the phone back into my pocket. Not tonight. She shook her head. Ryan, that is exactly what I mean. There is always something coming later. I stood and picked up my plate. Maybe. I carried it into the kitchen before anyone could see the smile I was trying not to show. Behind me, Mom started talking to Kevin again. Dad asked whether anyone wanted more coffee. The dinner slowly returned to normal. Mine did not. I stood beside the kitchen sink with my phone in my hand and opened Jennifer's email. The first sentence was only 9 words long. The National Distribution Network had approved our platform for rollout. I read it twice. Then I saw the attachment beneath it. The contract we had spent nearly a year trying to earn was finally real, and if we handled what came next correctly, my mother was about to discover that the years she thought I had spent failing were the same years I had spent building something she had never learned how to see. I did not open the attachment until I was sitting in my car. I left my parents' house 10 minutes after dinner, told Kevin congratulations one more time, hugged Dad, and kissed Mom on the cheek even though neither of us mentioned what she had said. The drive back toward Charlotte should have taken my mind somewhere else, but Jennifer's email sat in my pocket like a secret with weight. I pulled into a grocery store parking lot less than 3 miles from my parents' neighborhood, shut off the engine, and opened the contract. 47 pages. Implementation schedules. Performance requirements. Pricing tables. Service commitments. The numbers were larger than anything Marcus and I had ever handled. 4 years earlier, I would have looked at those numbers and imagined calling Mom immediately. Back then, she was the first person I called whenever something good happened. That was before I left a career she understood. I had been 28 when I joined Caldwell Systems, a logistics consulting firm headquartered in Charlotte. The office occupied 3 floors of a glass building near South Park, and on my first morning, I wore a navy suit that cost more than the monthly payment on my car. My starting salary was $78,000. Mom told everyone. By 30, I was earning over $100,000 with a performance bonus, health insurance, a retirement plan with an employer match, and enough paid vacation that Mom finally stopped asking whether I was saving money. She loved describing my job because it sounded secure. Ryan works in logistics technology, she would say at family gatherings. His company handles major accounts. I never corrected the possessive pride in her voice. I liked making her proud. Dad was proud too, but he showed it differently. He asked whether I liked my manager. Mom asked when I would become one. Kevin was still building his banking career then, and for once there was no competition between us. I was the older brother with the polished job, the good apartment, and the BMW parked outside. From the outside, nothing was wrong. The problem began with something I kept seeing at work. Large companies could afford complicated logistics systems and teams of consultants to manage them. Smaller regional distributors often could not. I sat through meeting after meeting with family-owned businesses that needed better tools but could not justify the cost of the systems we recommended. One afternoon, a distribution company from Western North Carolina spent 2 hours explaining how its employees were moving information between spreadsheets because the software options they had been quoted were too expensive and too complicated. I drove back to Charlotte thinking there had to be a simpler way. That thought followed me home. It followed me to work the next morning. Eventually, it became notebooks filled with diagrams, pricing ideas, and lists of problems small distributors kept repeating. Marcus Reed worked 2 floors below me at Caldwell. He had spent years on implementation projects and understood the technical side better than anyone I knew. I showed him my notes over coffee one Saturday morning. He read them for nearly 20 minutes. "This could work," he said. "That is a dangerous sentence. You wanted me to tell you it was terrible?" "A little." Marcus smiled. "It is not terrible." For the next year, we worked nights and weekends. We interviewed business owners. We built a basic platform. We tested it with 2 small companies willing to tolerate rough edges in exchange for a low price. I told Mom almost nothing. I knew what she would say before she said it. Then Caldwell offered me a promotion. Senior Director. $132,000 before bonus. A larger office. A stronger retirement contribution. It was exactly the kind of opportunity one had spent years working toward, and I turned it down. I resigned 3 weeks later. Mom learned about it at Sunday lunch. She stared at me as though I had misunderstood my own announcement. You quit. I gave notice. After they offered you a promotion? Yes. Why? Marcus and I are starting a company. She looked at Dad. Dad looked at me. Kevin stopped eating. Starting what kind of company? She asked. I explained the platform. I explained the market. I explained the 2 businesses already testing it. Mom listened until I finished. Then she asked the only question that mattered to her. How much are they paying you? Nobody is paying me a salary. Her face changed. Ryan, I have savings. That is not income. I know. What about health insurance? I have a plan for that. Your retirement? I am not retiring this year. She did not smile. This is not funny. Dad finally spoke. Let him finish. He finished. He quit a 6-figure job. I remember looking at Mom and realizing that we were discussing 2 completely different things. I was talking about an opportunity. She was talking about safety. I have enough saved for 18 months, I said. Marcus and I already have 2 pilot customers. 2 customers? Pilot customers. You left Caldwell for 2 customers? That sentence became the first crack between us. Not because she was entirely wrong. The risk was real, but I wanted her to ask what I was building. Instead, she asked what I had given up. During the first year, she kept sending me job listings. At Christmas, she asked whether Caldwell might take me back. When I told her we had signed our 5th client, she asked whether I was paying myself yet. When I said not much, she nodded like the answer confirmed something. Eventually, I stopped giving updates. Sitting in that grocery store parking lot 4 years later, I understood how far that silence had carried us. Mom still saw the son who had walked away from $132,000 and a corner of corporate security. She had no idea that Marcus and I now employed 17 people. She did not know we served dozens of regional businesses across the Southeast. She did not know we had been profitable for 14 straight months. And she definitely did not know that the 47-page contract glowing on my phone could become larger than every client agreement we had signed combined. My phone rang. Marcus, tell me you saw it, he said. I am looking at it. Jennifer says they want to start implementation discussions Monday. I saw that. Marcus paused. You sound strangely calm. I looked through the windshield at shoppers pushing carts beneath the parking lot lights. My mother called my career a failure tonight. There was silence on the other end. Before or after the approval? Before. Marcus let out a slow breath. Are you going to tell her? I looked down at the contract. For years, I had imagined the moment when I would finally have a result large enough to end the argument. Now it was sitting in my hand, and something about using it that way felt smaller than I expected. Not yet, I said. First we have to prove we can actually deliver. The first year after I left Caldwell Systems gave my mother plenty of evidence for her side of the argument. My old salary disappeared overnight, but my expenses did not. Health insurance cost more than I expected. Software subscriptions multiplied. Legal fees appeared whenever Marcus and I thought we had finally finished paying legal fees. Our first 2 pilot customers liked the platform, but liking software and paying enough for it to support a company were very different things. For the first 6 months, I paid myself almost nothing. I worked from a co-working space near Uptown Charlotte where our monthly membership gave us 2 desks, unreliable access to conference rooms, and unlimited coffee that tasted like it had been brewed during the previous administration. Marcus called it headquarters. I called it cheaper than an office. Mom called it temporary. Every Sunday dinner came with some version of the same questions. How many customers now? Are you paying yourself? What happens when your savings run out? At first, I answered everything. I told her about product improvements, customer feedback, and meetings with regional distributors. None of it sounded like progress to her because none of it came with the things she recognized. I no longer had a company title she could explain in one sentence. I no longer received a predictable paycheck every other Friday. My BMW became the first visible casualty. I had bought it used after my second promotion at Caldwell, and Mom loved that car more than I did because she thought it represented something. 18 months after starting the company, I sold it and bought a 3-year-old Honda Accord. The Honda was reliable, comfortable, and almost entirely paid for with the difference. To me, it was a financial decision. To Mom, it was a warning sign. You sold your car? She asked when I arrived for Thanksgiving. I bought another car. You know what I mean. The BMW was expensive to maintain. She looked through the front window at the Honda parked beside Kevin's newer SUV. You loved that BMW. I loved not having repair bills more. She did not argue, but I saw the concern on her face. 6 months later, my apartment lease came up for renewal. Instead of accepting a rent increase, I moved from a newer building near South End into a smaller one-bedroom apartment farther from downtown. It saved me almost $700 a month. Dad helped carry boxes. Mom walked through the living room and tried to hide her disappointment. It is smaller than your old place. That is generally how cheaper apartments work. Ryan, it is fine, Mom. She opened one of the kitchen cabinets as though the missing square footage might be hiding inside. I just do not understand why you are making your life harder. I understood the question, but I hated what it assumed. She thought sacrifice meant the plan was failing. I thought sacrifice was buying us time. Marcus was making the same choices. He delayed buying a house. We used secondhand monitors. We refused to hire anyone until revenue justified it. For almost 2 years, our company looked unimpressive from every angle that could be photographed. Then Kevin bought his first house. It was a 3-bedroom brick place in Matthews with a 2-car garage and a backyard large enough for the grill Dad gave him as a housewarming gift. I was happy for him. I meant that. But at the first family dinner there, Mom looked around his kitchen and said, "This is what patience gets you." Kevin heard it. So did I. "Mom," he said. "What?" "Do not do that." "Do what?" "Turn my house into a lesson for Ryan." I appreciated him saying it, but somehow that made the moment worse. I smiled and changed the subject. The comparisons became quieter after that, but they did not disappear. Kevin received another promotion. I moved desks at the co-working space because someone else had reserved our usual corner. Kevin started contributing more to his retirement account. I put another $15,000 of my savings into payroll and product development. At Christmas, Mom gave me a new leather briefcase. Inside was a business card from a recruiter she knew. "Just in case," she said. I thanked her and left the card in the briefcase for months. What she could not see was that our 3rd year was beginning differently. One of our pilot customers referred us to another distributor. That company referred us to 2 more. Marcus redesigned part of the platform around a problem every client seemed to share. Instead of trying to compete with huge logistics systems, we focused on one thing: helping regional distributors coordinate orders, inventory information, and delivery schedules without forcing their employees to replace every system they already used. The simpler our product became, the easier it was to sell. We signed our 3rd client, then our 7th, then our 11th. None of those contracts made us rich. Together, they changed the mathematics of the business. For the first time, recurring revenue covered our basic operating expenses. 3 months later, it covered payroll too. I called Dad after we signed client number 11. "That sounds good," he said. "It is. Did you tell your mother?" I looked across the co-working space at Marcus, who was celebrating by eating a vending machine candy bar because we had worked through lunch. "Not yet." Dad was quiet. "You two cannot keep talking around each other forever." "I'm not talking around her." "You stop telling her anything." "Because every update becomes a question about when I am getting a real job." "She worries." "I know. That does not mean she is right." I appreciated that, but I still did not call her. The silence became easier. When we hired our first employee, Mom did not know. When we signed our 20th client, she did not know. When we finally left the co-working space and leased a modest office in Southwest Charlotte, I told her we had moved, but never invited her to see it. By the beginning of our 4th year, we had 17 employees, dozens of clients, and 14 consecutive profitable months. Mom still pictured me at a borrowed desk watching my savings disappear. I told myself I kept the truth private because I no longer needed her approval. Then Jennifer Collins introduced us to a national distribution network looking for exactly the kind of platform we had spent years building. Their evaluation lasted nearly 11 months. Technical reviews, security checks, pilot locations, financial analysis. Every stage forced us to prove something new. During those months, I never mentioned the opportunity to Mom. Part of me wanted to protect the deal until it was real. Another part wanted something I was less proud to admit. I wanted one result so large that she would never be able to question my decision again. Sitting in my car after that family dinner, with final approval on my screen, I finally had it. And instead of feeling satisfied, I realized I had spent 4 years building a successful company while still measuring one part of that success against the expression on my mother's face. By the beginning of our 4th year, the company no longer looked like the experiment my mother imagined. Marcus and I had moved into a modest office in Southwest Charlotte with enough room for 20 people, although we only had 17 employees at the time. The walls were plain, the desks matched only because we had ordered them in one batch, and the break room coffee was still terrible, but the place belonged to us. Every morning when I unlocked the front door, I passed a glass wall with our company name printed across it. I never took a photograph for Mom. I told myself that was because I had stopped needing to prove anything. The truth was more complicated. Our growth had happened quietly. The 3rd client led to the 7th. The 7th introduced us to another distributor with 4 locations. Marcus rebuilt the part of our platform that handled inventory updates, and suddenly a process that had taken one customer nearly 2 hours each morning took less than 20 minutes. That customer told another business owner, then another. By the time we reached 27 clients, we had stopped wondering whether the market existed and started worrying about whether we could serve it properly. That was when we made our first real hire, a customer support specialist named Emily Parker. I remember her first morning because Marcus and I spent 20 minutes arguing over which one of us was officially responsible for explaining the health insurance plan. "You are the chief executive officer," he said. "You are the operations person." "That is not a title." "It is now." Emily watched us from across the conference table and finally laughed. "Do either of you know what you are doing?" "Increasingly," I said. She stayed. Within 6 months, we hired 4 more people. Then 8. Revenue became predictable enough that I started paying myself a normal salary again. Not what I had earned at Caldwell, but enough that I no longer moved money between accounts at the end of every month. The first time our accountant told us we had finished a quarter with a meaningful profit, Marcus bought lunch for the entire office. I called Dad that evening. I almost called Mom too. My finger hovered over her name, then moved away. I could already hear the questions. How much profit? Is it consistent? Does that mean you can finally pay yourself? When will you know whether this is permanent? None of those questions would have been unreasonable. That was what made our relationship so difficult. Mom rarely said anything that was obviously cruel. She simply treated every achievement as provisional until it resembled the kind of security she understood. So I stopped submitting evidence. The more the company grew, the less I discussed it at home. At Sunday dinners, when Mom asked how work was going, I said, "Busy." When she asked whether we had new customers, I said, "A few." When Kevin asked how many people worked for us, I changed the subject before Mom could turn the answer into another financial inspection. She interpreted my silence exactly the way I should have expected. She thought I was embarrassed. I knew that because Dad told me. "Your mother thinks you are hiding something," he said one Saturday while we were carrying bags of mulch across my parents' backyard. "I am." Dad stopped beside the flower bed. That was not the answer I expected. "I am hiding the fact that things are going well." "Why would you hide that?" "Because I am tired of defending every step before it becomes a finish line." Dad set down the bag. "She is worried about you. She has been worried for 4 years. That is what mothers do. There is a difference between worrying and assuming I am failing." Dad did not answer immediately. Maybe, but silence lets people fill in the blanks themselves. I knew he was right. I still did not change anything. Then Jennifer Collins entered the picture. Marcus met her at a regional logistics conference in Atlanta. She had spent more than 20 years working with distribution networks across the Southeast and knew the industry better than either of us. Marcus showed her a demonstration of our platform after a panel discussion. She called me 2 days later. "Your software is not the interesting part," she said. "That is encouraging." She laughed. "The interesting part is that you understand who should not use it." Most software companies wanted the largest customers they could find. We had learned that our platform worked best for regional distributors that had outgrown spreadsheets, but did not need enormous enterprise systems. Jennifer understood the value of that focus. She began advising us informally, introducing us to people she trusted, and challenging nearly every assumption Marcus and I made. 6 months later, she arranged a meeting with a national distribution network that operated hundreds of locations through regional divisions. Their executives were looking for a simpler platform they could introduce selectively without replacing their entire technology infrastructure. The first meeting lasted 90 minutes. The evaluation lasted nearly 11 months. They reviewed our security, tested our software at several locations, interviewed clients, examined our finances, asked whether a 17-person company in Charlotte could support a national organization without collapsing under the weight of its own opportunity. I wondered the same thing. We hired carefully, improved our systems, documented processes Marcus and I had once kept in our heads. Jennifer warned us not to mistake interest for a contract. Big companies can spend a year evaluating something and still walk away, she said. So we kept serving our existing customers as if the national deal did not exist. During those 11 months, our regular business continued growing. We passed 14 consecutive profitable months. We added clients in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, and Virginia. Emily became our customer success manager. Marcus finally stopped answering support messages at midnight. None of it reached my mother. Then, one Sunday evening, she sat across from me and used the word failure. Less than a minute later, Jennifer's email arrived. The next morning at 7:45, Marcus and I were sitting in our conference room with Jennifer on a video call, and the 47-page contract opened between us. Marcus looked as if he had slept about 3 hours. I probably looked worse. Jennifer did not congratulate us. She went directly to page 12. Before either of you starts celebrating, she said, read the rollout schedule. I found it. My excitement faded almost immediately. The client wanted an implementation timeline far more aggressive than anything we had discussed during testing. If we accepted it exactly as written, we would need to hire quickly, expand infrastructure, and commit resources we had spent 4 years learning not to waste. Marcus leaned toward the screen. Can we do it? Jennifer looked at him, then at me. That is the wrong question. What is the right one? I asked. She tapped the document visible on her screen. Whether you can do it without destroying the company you built to get here. I looked down at the contract. For years, I had wanted a result so obvious that nobody in my family could dismiss it. Now I finally had one, and the first thing it demanded from me was the discipline to risk losing it. Jennifer gave us until noon to decide whether we wanted to accept the rollout schedule as written or ask for changes before the National Distribution Network sent the agreement to its legal team. Marcus wanted to move fast. I understood why. We had spent nearly 11 months answering questions, running tests, demonstrating the platform, and waiting through weeks when nobody returned an email. Now the door was finally open, and asking the client to slow down felt like standing at the finish line and requesting another lap. They want 60 locations in the first 90 days, Marcus said, tapping the schedule. Then another 120 before the end of the first year. I can read. I am making sure you understand what we are looking at. I understand the revenue. That was the easiest part to understand. If the rollout worked, this client alone could increase our annual revenue by more than 40%. We would need more support staff, additional infrastructure, and probably a larger office within a year. Those were problems I had once dreamed about having. Jennifer leaned toward her camera. Revenue is not capacity. Marcus nodded. We can hire. How many people? She asked. He looked at me. I had already calculated it. At least 8 in the first 4 months. Maybe 10. Can you train 10 people while implementing 60 locations? Jennifer asked. Not well, I said. Marcus exhaled. So what are you suggesting? I turned the contract toward him. 30 locations in the first 90 days. Another 30 after we review performance. Then expand quarterly. They may not accept that. I know. Ryan, this is the largest opportunity we have ever had. That is exactly why I do not want to ruin it. Marcus stood and walked toward the conference room window. Outside, our employees were arriving. Emily carried a laptop in one hand and a paper coffee cup in the other. 2 developers were already talking beside a whiteboard. None of them knew what had happened the night before. I looked at them and thought about the first years, when Marcus and I had been willing to accept almost any customer because we needed revenue. We had learned the expensive difference between a good customer and a customer we were not ready to serve. We could make the original schedule work, Marcus said. For a while, I replied. That is not the same thing. Jennifer remained quiet. She was letting us argue because the decision belonged to us. Marcus returned to the table. 4 years ago, we would have signed this before they finished printing it. 4 years ago, we had 2 customers. Exactly. And now 17 people depend on us not behaving like we still have 2 customers. That ended the argument. Marcus sat down. 30 locations? 30. Then performance review. He nodded slowly. All right. Jennifer smiled for the first time that morning. Now you are thinking like people who intend to keep the company after they win the contract. We spent the next 3 hours rebuilding the rollout proposal. I called our attorney. Marcus reviewed staffing projections with Emily. Jennifer helped us identify which contract terms were likely negotiable and which ones were not. At 11:53, I sent the revised schedule, 7 minutes before the deadline. Then there was nothing to do but wait. That afternoon, Mom called. I almost did not answer. Hi, Mom. Are you busy? A little. I wanted to make sure you were not upset about last night. There were several possible answers. I chose the safest. I am fine. I probably said it too strongly. Probably. She paused. But I meant what I said about being worried. I looked through my office window. Marcus was standing beside Emily's desk reviewing his staffing chart. I know. Your father thinks I push too much. Dad is occasionally wise. Do not tell him I said that. I smiled. I will protect your reputation. She laughed softly, and for a moment we sounded like we used to. Then she said, Jennifer Collins mentioned something interesting when I saw her a few months ago. She said there are companies looking for people with logistics experience. I closed my eyes. Mom, I am not telling you what to do. You are doing a very convincing impression of it. I am saying you have options. So do I. I know you believe that. There it was again. Not anger. Not cruelty. Concern wrapped around doubt so tightly that neither of us could separate them anymore. I have to go, I said. Work? Yes, Mom. Work. All right. Call me this weekend. I will. After we hung up, I stared at the phone. I could have told her everything. I could have said that Jennifer was not helping me find a job. She was helping my company negotiate the largest agreement in its history. I could have told Mom about 17 employees, 14 profitable months, and a national client waiting on our revised proposal. Instead, I put the phone down. At 4:30, Jennifer called. They received your changes. And their operations team does not like the slower schedule. My stomach tightened. How much do they dislike it? Enough that they want a meeting tomorrow morning. Marcus was standing in my doorway now. He could tell from my face that the answer was not simple. Are they walking away? I asked. Not yet, Jennifer said. But tomorrow you are going to have to explain why they should trust a company that is asking to do less than they requested. After the call, Marcus sat across from me. Still think we made the right decision? Yes. You answered quickly. Ask me again tomorrow. That evening, I stayed at the office after everyone left. I opened the original rollout schedule beside our revised version. The original would have produced the bigger first-year number. It would have looked better in an announcement. It would have been the kind of number I could repeat at Sunday dinner and watch Mom finally run out of questions. I caught myself imagining that moment, and suddenly Jennifer's warning made even more sense. I had spent years telling myself that I was building this company because I believed in the work. If I accepted a dangerous plan simply because it gave me a more impressive result to show my mother, then she would still be influencing my career as much as she had when she wanted me to return to corporate life. The next morning, Marcus and I joined the client meeting at 9. 6 executives appeared on the screen. Their operations director went directly to the issue. We selected your platform because we believe it can scale. Your revised proposal suggests you are not as confident. I looked at Marcus, then back at the screen. For years earlier, I might have said whatever kept the deal alive. Instead, I told them the truth. We are confident in the platform. What we are not willing to do is confuse speed with success. The operations director did not respond immediately. He looked down at something on his desk, then back at the screen. Explain what you mean by that. I had spent most of the previous night preparing numbers, but suddenly the numbers felt like the least important part of the answer. During the pilot, your teams had time to learn the platform properly. We had time to monitor every location, respond to questions, and adjust the system when something did not work the way we expected. 60 locations in 90 days changes that. We could hire quickly and promise you the schedule you asked for, but we would be training new employees while they were supporting a rollout larger than anything we have handled. That creates risk for you and for us. One of the executives leaned toward her camera. Your competitors did not raise this concern. Then you should ask them why. Marcus glanced at me. I knew the sentence sounded more confident than I felt. The operations director folded his hands. You understand we selected your company because the pilot performed well. Yes. And now you are asking us to reduce the initial rollout by half. I am asking you to protect what made the pilot work. I shared the revised implementation plan on the screen. 30 locations during the first 90 days. Performance review. 30 more after service benchmarks were met. Quarterly expansion after that. We had added response time targets, customer training schedules, staffing projections, and specific conditions for accelerating the rollout if performance remained strong. This is not us saying we cannot scale, I said. This is us showing you how we intend to scale without making your employees pay for our ambition. The room went quiet again. Jennifer had not spoken once. She had warned us before the meeting that if she defended the proposal for us, the client would assume we did not believe in it ourselves. After 43 minutes, the operations director finally said they would review our plan internally and respond by the end of the week. The call ended. Marcus stared at the blank screen. Well, that went well. He turned toward me. Did we attend the same meeting? Nobody told us to leave. A very high standard. Jennifer called 5 minutes later. You did the right thing. You sound more confident than I feel, I said. Good decisions are not always comfortable decisions. Do you think they will accept it? I think they respect it. That is not the same as accepting it. We waited 3 days. I hated those 3 days. Every new email made me look at my phone. Every time Marcus entered my office, I assumed he had heard something. We continued running the company because 17 employees and dozens of customers did not care that the largest opportunity in our history was sitting inside someone else's conference room. On Thursday afternoon, Kevin called. Mom told me about Sunday. I leaned back in my chair. Of course she did. For what it is worth, I told her she was out of line. Thanks. She thinks she is helping. Everybody keeps telling me that. Because it is true. I looked through the glass wall toward the office. Emily was showing one of our newer employees something on her monitor. True does not automatically mean helpful. Kevin was quiet. Fair. Then he asked, is the company actually okay? I laughed. You too. No. I mean, you never tell us anything anymore. That stopped me. We are doing well. How well? 17 employees. Profitable for more than a year. Clients in 5 states. Silence. Seriously? Seriously. Ryan, Mom thinks you are barely keeping the lights on. I know. Why have you not told her? Because I got tired of turning every family dinner into a quarterly earnings call. Kevin laughed, then became serious again. She is going to feel stupid when she finds out. That is not what I want. The answer came quickly enough to surprise me. For years, I had imagined proving Mom wrong. But hearing Kevin describe her humiliation made the idea feel different. Then what do you want? He asked. I looked at the conference room where Marcus and I had spent 4 years making decisions nobody in my family knew about. I want her to understand why I did it. Friday morning arrived without an answer from the client. Noon passed. Then 3. At 4:18, Jennifer called both Marcus and me into a video meeting. She was smiling before either of us spoke. They accepted the phased rollout. Marcus leaned back and covered his face with both hands. I just stared at her. All of it, I asked. 30 locations. Performance review. Second group after benchmarks. Quarterly expansion. No 60 location launch. No, Marcus dropped his hands. I think I love responsible growth. Jennifer laughed. Wait until you see how much paperwork comes with it. The final agreement was signed the following Tuesday. We gathered the entire team in the conference room at 4 o'clock. Marcus stood beside me while Emily passed around sparkling cider in paper cups because several employees still had to drive home. I told them about the contract, the rollout, and the months of work ahead. I also told them we would hire carefully instead of doubling the team overnight. Nobody complained about the cautious version of success. They applauded anyway. Later, after everyone left, Marcus and I sat in the conference room, surrounded by empty cups and half a sheet cake someone had ordered from a grocery store down the road. You calling your mother? He asked. I looked at my phone. No. Still waiting for a bigger result? Actually, I think I am done presenting results. Marcus raised an eyebrow. That sounds suspiciously healthy. I smiled. Do not get used to it. Over the next 3 months, we implemented the first 30 locations. There were problems, but they were manageable. We hired 4 people instead of 10. Response time stayed within target. Customer adoption exceeded the benchmark in the contract. The client approved the second phase 2 weeks early. During those same months, Mom continued believing almost nothing had changed. She asked whether I was coming for Thanksgiving. She sent me an article about retirement savings. Once, She mentioned a management opening at a company where one of her friends worked. I did not argue. I simply said I was happy where I was. Then Marcus suggested an open house at our office after we completed the second rollout phase. Employees could bring their families. A few clients would attend. Jennifer would be in Charlotte that week. Invite your parents, Marcus said. Why? Because your mother has spent 4 years judging a building she has never walked into. I looked through the glass wall at the company she still imagined as two men borrowing desks in a co-working space. For once, I did not want to send her numbers or explain another milestone over the phone. All right, I said. I will invite them. Mom accepted the invitation before I finished explaining what the open house was for. Of course we will come, she said. Your father has been asking to see the place. I almost asked why Dad had never mentioned that to me, but I let it go. The event was scheduled for a Thursday evening in early December, 3 weeks after the second rollout phase received approval. By then, our national client had 60 locations using the platform, customer adoption was ahead of target, and our support response times were better than they had been before the contract. We had also grown from 17 employees to 21, which was exactly 4 more than we had when the agreement was signed. No frantic hiring. No desperate expansion. No promises we could not keep. The decision that had almost cost us the deal had become the reason we were delivering it well. On the afternoon of the open house, Marcus walked into my office carrying a box of name tags. You nervous? About what? Your mother finally discovering that you have been lying by omission for several years. I never lied. That is why I added the words by omission. I looked through the glass wall. Emily was arranging food on a long table near the conference room. A local restaurant had delivered barbecue, baked beans, coleslaw, and trays of cornbread. Employees were bringing spouses, parents, and a few children. Several longtime clients had accepted our invitation. Jennifer was driving up from Atlanta and had promised to arrive before 6. It was not a launch party. There were no reporters, oversized checks, or dramatic announcements. I wanted Mom to see the company as it actually existed. At 5:48, I saw Dad's truck pull into the parking lot. Mom stepped out wearing a dark green coat. Dad walked around the front of the truck and stared at the building before they even reached the entrance. I met them in the lobby. Mom looked through the glass doors behind me. This is all yours. We lease it. Dad smiled. That was not what she meant. I know. Mom stepped inside. 21 employees did not look like a huge company, but they looked very different from 2 desks in a co-working space. Phones sat beside monitors. Project schedules covered whiteboards. A wall-mounted screen displayed service statistics from active client locations. The conference room had our company logo etched into the glass. Mom stopped near the reception desk. How many people work here? 21. She turned toward me. 21. Including Marcus and me. You employ 19 people? That is generally how the math works. Dad gave me a warning look. Be nice. I am being nice. Mom was still staring across the office. Emily walked over and held out her hand. You must be Ryan's parents. I am Emily Parker. Mom shook it. How long have you worked with Ryan? Almost 3 years. Mom looked at me again. She had not known that either. Emily continued, unaware of the history unfolding beside her. Ryan and Marcus hired me when there were only 3 of us. I think my desk was assembled with a screwdriver Ryan borrowed from the co-working manager. That sounds accurate, Dad said. Emily laughed. You should have seen this place when we moved in. We thought having our own conference room meant we had made it. She was called away before Mom could ask anything else. Dad wandered toward a display showing a map of our customer locations. Mom stayed beside me. Almost 3 years. Yes. You never told me. You knew we had employees. I thought you meant a few contractors. Before I could answer, Kevin arrived. He took one look around and whistled. Okay, this is not what I pictured. Mom turned toward him. You knew they had 17 employees. Ryan told me a few months ago. Her expression changed. You knew? Kevin immediately realized he had walked into something. I found out after the dinner. And nobody thought to tell me. Dad stepped closer. Linda, maybe tonight is not the time. Mom looked embarrassed rather than angry. I am just surprised. That was the idea, Marcus said as he approached. He shook Dad's hand, hugged Mom because he had known her for years, and handed each of them a name tag. Welcome to the failed career. I gave him a look. Marcus. Too soon. Mom's face went red. Marcus immediately softened. I am kidding, Mrs. Mitchell. Ryan told me what happened. Apparently, Ryan tells everyone things except me. That sentence stayed with me as more guests arrived. For the next hour, Mom barely asked me anything. She watched. That mattered more. She watched Emily introduce new employees to longtime clients. She watched Marcus explain a product update to Dad. She watched two business owners thank our support team by name. She saw photographs on the hallway wall from our first office, our 10th client, and the day we hired Emily. Years she had reduced to uncertainty were hanging in frames 10 feet away from her. At 7, Jennifer arrived. Mom recognized her immediately. Jennifer. Jennifer smiled and hugged her. Linda, good to see you again. Mom looked between us. You know Ryan? Jennifer laughed. Know him. I have spent the last year trying to keep him and Marcus from creating unnecessary problems for themselves. Mom's eyes widened. I thought you were helping people find corporate positions. Jennifer looked confused. Then she understood. No, I have been advising their company. Mom turned toward me slowly. I could see 4 years of assumptions rearranging themselves behind her expression. Before either of us could speak, Marcus tapped a spoon against his paper cup and thanked everyone for coming. He talked briefly about the employees, the clients, and the families who had supported them. Then he handed the attention to Jennifer. She did not mention revenue. She did not mention valuation. She talked about the national rollout. 3 months ago, she said, this team had the opportunity to chase the biggest contract it had ever seen at the fastest possible speed. Instead, Ryan and Marcus told the client to slow down. A few employees laughed because they knew the story. Jennifer continued. That decision is why 60 locations are now operating successfully, why the second phase was approved early, and why this company is positioned to expand without sacrificing the service that got it here. I looked toward Mom. She was not looking at Jennifer. She was looking at me. There was no triumph in the moment. I had imagined triumph. Instead, I felt strangely sad. My mother had spent years believing I was failing, and I had spent years making sure she never had enough information to reconsider. After the speeches, she walked slowly along the hallway photographs. She stopped at one showing Marcus and me in the co-working space beside Emily on her first day. 3 people. 2 mismatched desks. 1 borrowed conference room visible behind us. Mom touched the edge of the frame. I remember this year, she said. You sold the BMW. Yes. You moved into that small apartment. Yes. She looked at the next photograph. 7 employees standing inside our first office. And this was happening at the same time. Yes. She stared at the picture for several seconds. Then she asked the question I had known was coming from the moment she walked through the door. Ryan, why did you let me think you were failing? For a few seconds, I did not know how to answer her. The office was still full of people, but the hallway had become quieter as most of the guests moved toward the conference room and food tables. Mom stood beside the photographs with her coat folded over one arm, looking at me as if she had discovered that 4 years of our conversations had been built around 2 completely different versions of my life. I did not let you think anything, I said finally. Her eyebrows lifted. Ryan, I thought you were barely getting by. Because every time I tried to tell you what we were building, you asked when I was going back to a real job. That is not fair, is it not? She looked toward the photograph of our first 7 employees. You could have told me about this. I could have. You could have told me you were profitable. Yes. You could have told me about the national contract. That did not exist until recently. But the rest did. I nodded. The rest did. Mom lowered her voice. Then why? I looked through the glass wall toward Dad. He was talking with Marcus near the customer map, but I could tell from the way he glanced toward us that he knew exactly what conversation was happening. Because I got tired, I said. Of what? Explaining the process to someone who only wanted to know whether I had reached the finish line. Mom stared at me. I was worried about you. I know. You gave up a salary most people would be grateful to have. You sold your car. You moved into a smaller apartment. You stopped taking vacations. What was I supposed to think? You could have asked what I was building instead of assuming those things meant I was failing. I did ask. No. You asked when I was going to stop. She opened her mouth, then closed it. That was the first moment all evening when she had no immediate answer. We moved into my office because 2 employees walked past us carrying plates of food, and neither of us wanted to have the conversation in the hallway. Mom sat in the chair across from my desk. I remained standing for a moment before sitting down. She looked around the room. There was nothing impressive about it. A desk, 2 chairs, a bookshelf, and a whiteboard covered with rollout notes. You really work here every day? She asked. Most days. I imagined something smaller. I know. I suppose that is my fault. I almost accepted the sentence and moved on. Instead, I said, some of it is mine. She looked surprised. Dad told me silence lets people fill in the blanks. I knew you had the wrong picture. I stopped correcting it. Why? I looked down at my hands. The answer was uncomfortable because it was not as noble as I wanted it to be. At first, because I was tired of defending myself. Later, because I wanted to prove you wrong. Mom looked away. I see. I kept thinking there would be some number big enough that you would finally understand. More customers. More employees. More revenue. Then this national deal came along, and I thought that would be it. Why did you not tell me when you got it? Because the first version of the contract wanted us to grow too fast. I explained the rollout schedule, the pressure to hire quickly, and the decision Marcus and I made to negotiate for 30 locations instead of 60 during the first phase. I told her how close we might have come to losing the opportunity. You turned down part of the contract? She asked. We changed the schedule. Knowing they could walk away? Yes. Why? Because 17 people worked here. Dozens of customers depended on us. I was not willing to risk all of that just so the first-year number would look better. Mom became very quiet. Then she said, that does not sound like you 4 years ago. It was not. 4 years ago, you would have taken the risk. Probably. And I would have told you not to. Definitely. A small smile appeared on her face and disappeared almost immediately. Maybe that is what I never understood. What? She looked toward the office window. I thought you were still the man who quit Caldwell. I am. No. You are the same person, but you are not making decisions the same way. I did not answer. Mom folded her hands in her lap. Do you remember when you were 9 and your father lost his job? I did, but not clearly. I remembered Dad being home more often. I remembered Mom clipping coupons at the kitchen table. I remembered being told that summer vacation would be a weekend at a state park instead of the trip to Florida we had discussed. A little. You did not know how bad it was. Her voice changed. Thomas was out of work for 7 months. We had a mortgage, 2 children, and less savings than you probably think we had. I went back to work full-time at the medical office. We stopped using credit cards because I was afraid we would not be able to pay them. Every morning I woke up wondering how many months we had before something had to go. I had never heard the story that way. Dad eventually found another job, and in my childhood memory, life simply returned to normal. Why did you never tell us? I asked. Because you were children. She looked at me. When you got the job at Caldwell, I thought you had escaped all of that. Salary, insurance, retirement, every boring thing I had spent years praying my children would have. Suddenly, every question she had asked me sounded slightly different. Not better, not harmless, but different. So when I quit, I said, you thought I was throwing away safety. I thought you were voluntarily walking toward the thing your father and I had spent years trying to protect you from. That does not make what you said okay. I know. Her answer came without hesitation. Calling your work a failure was wrong. I looked at her. I needed you to say that. I should have said it sooner. She paused. But you should have told me you were doing well. Probably. Not because you owed me a report. Good. Because I am your mother, Ryan. I would have liked the chance to be proud before tonight. That sentence hit harder than I expected. I had spent years believing Mom had refused to see my progress. I had never considered how carefully I had hidden it once progress finally came. I thought if I showed you enough success all at once, it would settle everything. I said. Did it? I looked through the window at Marcus laughing with Dad, at Emily introducing her husband to one of our clients, at 21 people whose jobs existed because of decisions that had once looked irresponsible from my mother's kitchen table. No, I said, but I think this conversation might. Mom stood and walked toward the door, then stopped. Ryan. Yeah. I still do not understand half of what your company does. I smiled. That sounds like progress. She smiled too. Maybe you can explain it to me without assuming I am about to tell you to get another job. Maybe you can listen without asking about my retirement account. She considered that. I cannot promise miracles. We walked back toward the open house together, and for the first time in 4 years, I was not thinking about how to prove my mother wrong. I was wondering whether I had finally learned enough to let her understand me. 3 months after the open house, Mom came to the office again, but this time she did not need an invitation. She arrived on a Tuesday morning carrying 2 cardboard trays of coffee and a paper bag from a bakery near her house. Emily saw her first and waved her through the lobby like she belonged there. That alone made me smile. "I brought breakfast," Mom said when she reached my office. "For 21 people?" "24 now," she replied. I stared at her. "How do you know that?" "Your father told me." "Dad knows. Apparently your father asks questions and you answer him." She set the bag on my desk. "I am learning." We had hired 3 more employees since December. The national rollout had reached 90 locations, and the next phase was scheduled for spring. More importantly, our existing customers had continued growing with us. The national contract had not swallowed the company. It had become one part of it, exactly as Marcus and I had hoped. Mom knew more now, although I still refused to turn Sunday dinners into business meetings. She had stopped sending me job listings. She had also stopped asking when I planned to buy another BMW, which I considered significant personal growth. "Do you have 10 minutes?" she asked. "Sure." She sat across from me while I opened the bakery bag. "Blueberry muffins? Your favorite." Kevin would argue with that. "Kevin is not here." I handed her one. For a few minutes, we talked about Dad's latest home improvement project and Kevin's plans to renovate his kitchen. Then Mom looked through the glass wall at the office. "Can I ask you something without you assuming I am criticizing you?" "That depends entirely on the question." She gave me the look I had been receiving since childhood. "How much is the company worth?" I laughed. "There it is. I am curious." "Why?" "Because I still do not understand how any of this works. That is different from needing to know the valuation." "Is there a valuation?" "There is always a valuation if someone is willing to argue long enough." She smiled. "You are avoiding the question." I was. The truth was that we had received investment inquiries since the national contract became public within the industry. Marcus and I had discussed them, but we were not looking to sell. 4 years earlier, I would have loved telling Mom the largest number anyone had mentioned. I would have watched her face while I said it. Now the number felt almost irrelevant to the conversation I wanted to have. "Come with me," I said. I took her to the conference room and opened an email on the large screen. It had arrived the previous week from a family-owned distributor in Tennessee that had been one of our earlier clients. They operated 3 warehouses and employed just over 80 people. 2 years earlier, rising costs and inefficient inventory management had forced them to consider closing 1 location. Our platform had not magically solved every problem they had, but it had helped them reduce wasted delivery miles, improve inventory visibility, and reorganize how orders moved between locations. The owner had written to tell us that the changes helped them keep the 3rd warehouse open through a difficult year. "Why are you showing me this?" Mom asked. "Because you asked what the company is worth." "That is not what I meant." "I know." I scrolled to the last section of the email. The owner thanked Emily and our support team by name. He wrote that keeping the warehouse open meant keeping 14 employees in jobs they had held for years. Mom read the sentence twice. 14 people. "Yes." "Because of your software?" "Not just because of us. They made a lot of changes. We helped." She sat back. "You never told me about things like this." I did not understand things like this at first either. She looked at me. "What do you mean?" "When Marcus and I started, I measured everything the same way you did. Revenue, customers, whether I could pay myself, whether I looked successful enough to justify leaving Caldwell. I suppose I trained you well. You were not the only one." I sat across from her. Then something changed. We started seeing what happened inside the businesses using the platform. A warehouse kept open. A manager stopped spending 2 hours every morning fixing spreadsheets. A family business could grow without buying a system designed for a corporation 10 times its size. Those were results too. Mom looked toward the screen again. "I thought success meant knowing you would be safe." Her voice was quiet. "For years, that was all I wanted for you and Kevin. I know that now. Your father losing his job changed me more than I realized. It changed what you wanted for us. It made me think risk was something responsible people avoided. I considered that. I think responsibility is knowing which risks are worth taking. And you think this one was?" I looked through the conference room glass. Marcus was talking with one of our developers. Emily was helping a new employee at the reception desk. 24 people work there now. 90 national locations were using something that had once existed only in notebooks Marcus and I filled after work. "Yes," I said. "Even when you sold the car?" "Especially then." Mom laughed. "I hated that Honda." "I know. It made me think everything was falling apart. It saved me almost $9,000 the first year between the payment, insurance, and maintenance. Her expression changed. 9,000. Now you approve? I am still your mother. We both laughed. Then she became serious. I owe you something. You already brought muffins. Ryan. I stopped joking. All right. She folded her hands. I am proud of you. 4 years earlier, those words would have felt like the final verdict in a trial I had been arguing since the day I resigned from Caldwell. I had imagined hearing them after some enormous contract, some impressive revenue number, or some undeniable proof that I had been right. Hearing them now was different. They mattered because she was my mother and I loved her. But they did not certify my choices. They did not make the difficult years worthwhile. They did not transform uncertainty into wisdom after the fact. The work had already done that. Thank you, I said. Mom smiled. That is all. What were you expecting? Maybe a speech. You raised me to be efficient. She shook her head and stood. At the door, she looked back at the email still displayed on the screen. 14 jobs. 14 at that warehouse. That is a pretty good result. It is one of them. After she left, I returned to my office and found Marcus waiting beside my desk with a muffin. Your mother brought these? Yes. So she finally approves of the company? I sat down and opened my laptop. I think she does. How does that feel? I thought about the dinner months earlier, the words she had used, and the answer I had given before opening Jennifer's email. For years, I thought results were supposed to end an argument. I thought if I accumulated enough proof, the people who doubted me would have no choice but to admit I had won. I had been wrong. The best results were never arguments. They were 24 people coming to work in the morning. They were customers trusting us with businesses they had spent decades building. They were 14 employees in Tennessee still driving to the same warehouse every week. They were the ability to look at an enormous opportunity and say no to the part that could damage everything we had built. My mother's approval mattered to me, and I was finally comfortable admitting that. I simply did not need it to decide whether my career had value. Marcus took another bite of the muffin. You never answered the question. Which question? How does it feel? I looked through the glass wall at the company we had once run from 2 borrowed desks. It feels like I finally understand what I was trying to build.